Guys, welcome to another Moonoveraquarius experience. Today we are at the Kimberley Big hole. As you can see how wonderful it is.
Kimberley is obviously famous for diamonds, but it's really famous as for the first place where they actually found diamonds inside a rock. So diamonds have been known for 3,000 years in India. They're always found in rivers. Didn't know where this mineral came from. And then they found in the 1700s, they found diamonds in Brazil. And then 1866, they pick up the first diamond in a river, in the Orange River, just south of Kimberley. And a year later, they pick up a much bigger diamond, the 80 carat, and that led them up the Vaal River, and then a major discovery at a place today called Berkeley West. And then at Berkeley West, at one stage there were 30,000 diggers digging in the river at Berkeley. And one of the diggers, a guy called Robinson, heard about a farmer's wife talking about pretty stones that she'd found on their farm 30 kilometers away, which is the site of Kimberley today. And this guy rode there on his horse and started digging, and sure enough found diamonds. It turned out that they were then digging on top of a... The early guys thought that they were digging on an old river, very far away from the modern river. Then in 1873, a geologist from America came out and said, yeah, you are digging in a river, but it's a vertical river. It's a volcano. So that's the first time that they really discovered a rock. Now, how it works in geology, the very first rock, not previously discovered before, is named after the location. And this town had already then been given the name of Kimberley, so the rock is called kimberlite after Kimberley. So just to show you, I worked with an artist, and we did this to educate our staff. We made a series of 6 paintings, they're all over here. But this is the one to think about. So, as I said, the first 2 that were discovered, the lady was this pipe called Bultfontein and de Toyspan, which is about 5 kilometers to the east of here. Here's De Beers mine and the Big Hole, number 4. So De Beers and the Big Hole were on one farm called Vooruitzicht, which is Dutch meaning looking forward. And the name De Beers comes from the owner of that farm. There were 2 brothers that owned the farm, and their surname is De Beer. So the company was called De Beers. And that's the one that Cecil John Rhodes got control of. But coming back to geology, so that when we look into the Big Hole, you must understand this. So you were told, you saw in the movie that these are just volcanoes. They're very special volcanoes. They come from ultra deep, and they're very aggressive, very fast, and very explosive. Interestingly, none of these type of volcanoes are exploding around the world today. The youngest we've got is in Tanzania and Canada at 40 million. These are dated at 90 million. And here's one astounding fact that must just stick in your brain. What's really fascinating is these things come from depth, pick up diamonds, and bring them to the surface. The diamonds we've dated at 3,000 million years, 3 billion years. And the volcano is only 90 million. They've got nothing to do. The volcano is just a train that brings it up to the surface. And what's interesting in this diagram, we've worked out that today you are walking on this black rock. Yeah. In fact, the biggest part of the pipe with the most diamonds has been eroded away since 90 million. And that's all the diamonds that you find in the river today and out to sea, off the coast of Namibia and West Namaqualand. So all that's been eroded, gone. Today, they're mining down here at a depth of about 1,000 meters. Okay, let's take a walk up this way. So what happened in the early 1990s, they found that, they realized that the big hole's actually collapsing. Like all big holes, they collapse. and it's collapsing a bit further more onto the northwestern side. And they decided to move some of the oldest and most famous exhibits from this side way to the back to preserve them. And that's when they shut this place down for about 2 years, built, this is all new, but built in a Victorian style. And this was the single most expensive part of the project, this hanging bridge that you can look over into the hole. So we just come to the geology of this mine. This is the type of thing you're going to see when we look into the pipe. We've got debris at the top. This basalt is actually slightly incorrect. It's actually dolerite, which is the feeder for the basalts. Basalt is a rock that flows out on surface. This is what forms Lesotho, the Drakensberg basalts. 180 million years old. Then you go into a bunch of soft sediments. And these are glacial shales dated at 300 million. This is the big problem of mining in this particular area. You've got a very hard rock underlain by soft rock, and that weathers away and then collapses in. So the early days of digging by hand, probably down to about this level, quite dangerous stuff falling in on the side. And then there's a massive jump at this level here, downwards. This is an old term mellifier. It's a rock called an andesite. This is the Ventersdorp supergroup, and it's 2,600 million, 2.6 billion years old, all the way down to there, where we now move into 3.2 billion year old rock. This is roughly the age of actually the diamonds. So this rock, the age of the diamonds, formed pretty soon after the formation of the Earth. So just look at some stats. I excavated 22.5 million tons of kimberlite for 2.7 tons of diamonds. It's a lot of diamonds. And as we walk to go up here to go and look at the hole, you'll see there's a big diamond-shaped thing there on the platform where we stand. They've worked out roughly bit of a guess as to the volume of diamonds that was recovered from this hole. And what's important to understand here is the whole historical thing and the importance of the discovery of Kimberley and diamonds. If we go back in history, the Dutch colonized the Cape only as a station to get fresh water and food and stuff for their ships going to the east. And then they lost in a war to England, and England, Britain acquired the Cape, and they arrived here. But again, the Cape was an absolute pain in the butt colony for the Brits. It was poor. It had a bunch of rebellious Dutch farmers who didn't want to learn English. And again, it was just a station going out to the East Indies. And then they discovered diamond. It goes from nothing to number one in the British Empire. Okay. And everything today in South Africa, from an economic point of view, starts here with the money made in Kimberley.
Yes.
Gold comes a couple of years later, and it's quite interesting that gold, when they found that gold was such a complicated mine, product to mine, the way it was deposited, whereas these pipes are fairly easy. You basically just got to go in like a mole and eat them from underground. And of course, what had happened as soon as the rock got harder, and you saw in the movie, Bonato was advised or was clever enough to work out it's the same rock. But now they had to actually set up a school of mines to teach guys how to mine underground. Yes. With dynamite and blasting and stuff like that. So, and that started here in the suburb of De Beers. Today it's a pretty rundown old building. But interestingly enough, after the discovery of gold, and they realized that mining was far more complicated for gold, they moved the School of Mines to Johannesburg. Okay. And that School of Mines morphed into University of Witwatersrand. Sure. So Wits actually started in Kimberley. A lot of things started in Kimberley. Interesting. These are the old, beautiful One of the other features of Kimberley, because it had the money, and round about the time of Kimberley discovery, electricity was discovered. So Kimberley is the first city in the southern hemisphere and the third in the world to get electricity.
Sure.
And there are your electric
Lights.
street lights, beautiful lights. Okay, so if we look at the geology, the brown rock is a rock called dolerite, 180 million years old. These are the feeder systems for the Drakensberg lava. Then you jump to a rock that was deposited by melting glaciers during when Southern Africa was under an ice age, and that's 300 million years old, and that's your problem, rock in this area. Yeah. Soft rock underneath
the hard rock.
The hard rock, and it collapses. But this is the pipe. It's 5 hectares in size, not that big, but this is one of the few places where you can actually see the exact outline and shape of what we call the contact. In geology, a contact is the junction between one rock and the next one. So that's the wall rock contact. And it's interesting that these volcanoes, depending whether the rock's hard or soft, just cuts through it like a knife through butter. But the important thing here to realize is that at 90 million, your mouth of the volcano, the crater is up probably 1,000 meters above us. And all of that is gone. And these things look like ice cream cones. They actually get bigger and bigger. And therefore, Kimberley's actually lost the bulk of its diamonds. And that's what's gone down the river and down the Vaal and into the Orange and eventually out to sea. And here's a point that just shows how lucky Botswana was from a geological point of view. The major pipe that was discovered in 1967, a year after Botswana became independent, is Arapa. It's exactly the same age as Kimberley at 90 million, but it's right at the top. There's been no erosion. By some quirk of nature, Botswana was buckled down to form the Kalahari Basin, and it preserved the pipe in its entirety.
Sure, very interesting.
It's incredible. They got diamonds there for a long, long time.
Is this collapsing or is it?
It slowly collapses. All big holes collapse. And what is really interesting shows that even the guys in the old days were clever. See that green building there? That was Barney Bonato's head office and then turned into the De Beers head office. They'd already calculated that all holes break back until they get to an angle of about 45 degrees. Then it's stable. And that is exactly where the breakback is in like 100, 200 years' time. And that's where they built their head office, just beyond reach. But here they had to move some of the best exhibits away because of the break. Okay. So when I come back here or my grandchildren come back here as old people, this will be over the edge. There has been talk, and I actually wish they would do it. The Swiss company wants to put up a zip line from there right across to the other side. I wish they would do it. Could be fun. Okay.
Barney Bonato, what nationality was he?
What's that?
Barney Bonato.
Bonato, he's from East London. east of London.
Oh, I see.
He's a Cockney.
Okay.
Okay, let's move it a bit. We've got an hour. So the headgear you see in front of you is the original headgear of the mine, but not in its position. The shaft was over there somewhere, on that side.
Okay. Oh, so they moved everything.
And they moved it here just for the museum. But this is interesting that all of this was pre-electricity, so that whole winding gear there is actually driven by steam. You can just imagine the logistics of bringing this out from England by ship.
In those days, yeah.
And then with train halfway, and then by ox wagon. And they must have had incredible.
And all the diseases they had on the way as well.
But all incredible bloody workshops here to assemble all of this. So, pre-electricity, they had these steam engines pulling cocoa pans. And what happened, lucky enough, Kimberley's flat. So each mine had what areas that they called floors, big floors. And they laid the kimberlite out and rode over it with steam tractors like that big steam tractor, that red thing. We're going to have a look. And they let nature break down the kimberlite for anything from 6 months up to a year. Then they'd pick it up and treat it. So we're just going to show you that in addition to the diamonds, this is where I started getting involved, this area and the collection on these floors of strange rocks that suddenly the guys realized actually diamonds aren't growing in the kimberlite. Diamonds are growing in other rocks that are picked up by the kimberlite and brought to the surface from deep down, what area of the earth we call the mantle. And virtually everything that we know about the earth down to 200 kilometers comes from a study of mantle rocks picked up on the old floors, brought up from the deep depths by the kimberlite. And this is the only place in the world, not here, but I mean in kimberlites, it's the only place in the world where you can actually find these type of rocks, because these kimberlites come from depths of 300-400 kilometers. One thing that I forgot to mention is to actually grow a diamond, you've got to be deeper than 45 kilobars, which translates to a depth of 150 kilometers.
Wow.
From here to Bloemfontein.
Sure.
Shallower than that, you've got the softest mineral, graphite, which is a pencil point. Deeper than that, you've got the hardest mineral, which is quite weird. Just across one boundary.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so let's just go look at some mantle rocks. Even underground toilets. When we were setting up the museum, we scoured everything for really old stuff like these cooker pans, toilets, these things. So these rocks are incredibly rare. In fact, these rocks are so rare that I can go to the moon and come back with a piece of rock. I can't go to where these guys come from. This is at 150 kilometers depth and at 1,000 degrees. Wow. What we call mantle xenoliths. Xeno is foreign, lith rock, foreign rock to the kimberlite. And how they realized that the diamonds weren't growing in the kimberlite is they were finding diamonds inside these rocks. Then they realized that the diamonds are actually much older, grown in these rocks. The kimberlite, when it breaks through the mantle, picks this lot up, breaks them up, releases them, and releases diamonds into the kimberlite. So they're very special rocks. And most of us have done postgraduate studies on these things. And these are the type of rocks. They're actually heavy by comparison because they come from great depths. And there are 4 minerals inside here. This ugly brown is olivine. This khaki colored mineral called orthopyroxene. You can see the bright green, apple green chrome diopside and the purple garnet. These are the minerals that we call the indicator minerals. They can't occur on surface, only if they're brought up by kimberlite. And in fact, to try and find a pipe, we look for these minerals because there are more of them than there are diamonds to actually find the pipe. And that's what the rock looks like. Very heavy rock under huge pressure, down at 150 kilometers.
Just to get them up must have been a mission, eh?
Well, this pipe, this volcano, that's what makes it very, very special. And then these are the type of, here's a recreation of what are called a floor. And they'd lay the kimberlite out and run tractor over all of them. There are thousands of guys picking up waste rock that didn't have diamonds, not kimberlite. Pack it on the side. And it's quite interesting, just bear this in mind. And I'll show you a photograph downstairs. There had thousands of guys picking up the waste rock, but they also had hundreds of security guys. If you were found putting something in your mouth, you picked up, put in a jail cell, stripped, and fed a concoction, and evacuated the kimberlite, the diamond. And I'll show you a photograph of what came out of a guy's stomach. You can actually see, you can see that this was quite an advanced cage even in those days, this headgear. You've got the solid one on the left, and that's for rock, and you've got a double stage man cage on the right, and they counterbalance each other up and down.
This was transferred to Jeanette Mine.
Yeah, that's a gold mine, and when the gold mine went bust, De Beers bought it back and brought it here and put it up. Yeah.
What was the purpose of the diamond? I know it's wear them as jewelry and things like that, but this is wrong. I wonder what the initial purpose was, naturally.
Sorry, just say that again. What's the initial?
Yeah, like sand is used to cover the earth, and the diamond. What was the purpose of the diamond, earth-wise? You know?
No purpose. It's just carbon is about one of the most common elements in the actual universe.
Yes.
In fact, today they speculate that there's stars out there that the only signature they get is carbon.
Oh, I see.
Like billions of years. So, and you know, the deep earth is full of carbon still. If you look at gases coming out of even modern day volcanoes, they're full of CO2, methane, which is CH4. All you have to do is just to basically remove the H's and you're left with pure carbon, and that grows a diamond. And the reason...
So the carbon grows a diamond?
Yes,
okay.
Diamond is just pure carbon.
Oh, right.
It's the carbon, it's a mineral of pure carbon, like gold is the mineral of pure gold, AU.
Okay.
So this is carbon.
So how do you differentiate between a authentic diamond
And a lab-grown diamond? It's incredibly difficult. De Beers has now got a little machine that they've put on some of the big retail stores, and you can drop your stone in there. There's something about the reflectance, internal reflectance, that they can tell that the difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically this is the volcano. Here's the rock of the volcano, and it's broken everything in its path. all these olivines are coming out of this rock. So this is the rock that the diamond actually grows in, this one. And you can see that this brown and this brown are all the same. So it smashes these things up when it picks it up at 200 kilometers and brings it to the surface, releases the diamonds. And what's interesting, of course, the way that geology works, or mineralogy, is minerals keep their same composition but adjust their shape depending on what temperature and pressure they are. For instance, if I put you under a big press and I squeeze you, your body just explodes. If you do that to a mineral, it changes shape.
Oh.
It keeps the same pressure. That's why at high pressure, pure carbon is diamond. At low pressure, pure carbon is graphite,
Okay.
which is a pencil point. You go from the hardest to the softest. And but that's happening at 150 kilometers deep. Why modern volcanoes don't bring up diamonds? They're way too shallow. That's what makes these volcanoes so special. These things we think come from 400 or 500 kilometers. But, and here's the next thing is, these are considered to be the Ferraris of volcanoes. They've got to come up fast because the way minerals work, as soon as you take a diamond and move it to lower pressure, it's trying to turn back to carbon.
Okay.
But if it happens too quickly, it's effectively frozen in. It needs time and it needs temperature. But this thing is shooting up very fast and then explodes and cools, and the diamond's frozen. So the diamond on your wife's ring is very unhappy. It doesn't want to be there. Wants to go back to a pencil. Okay. So we did research to see how big the tunnels were. This was a comfortable mine. By this stage, they'd invented electricity, so there was lights. So this is what it looked like. And you're down about 800 meters, you're into this hard rock, the Ventersdorp. So in all sense, a fairly...
So this is the conditions everyone was working under, and was hot as well, eh?
Yeah, no, it is warm, yeah. But actually better than out in the open pit. Open pits are way too hot. You can imagine working in an open pit at 40 degrees.
Yeah.
So you'd come down your shaft, which would be there, and the mine is over there. And then you have your access tunnels that you're drilling and blasting there's a drawing over here just now to show you how they actually mined this. And this would be the pipe over here, inside there. And then essentially you have two shifts. One is drilling and blasting, and the other one is loading after the blast. Don't get a fright. What you don't see is this little box. As you walk past that box, it triggers a recording. We went underground now. In a real mine, you get blockages when a big rock falls in and blocks a thing. You've got to get up there and stick a piece of dynamite and blow it away. So we went down and we recorded the actual sound. You can just go around the corner and let them blast it. And that's the recording that you're hearing. And then the guys would load, push the cooker pan. Okay, this is now, you can just see the railway line over there. Push the cooker pan, drop it into that box, and that goes down and is lifted up in the shaft. And what's fascinating, if you look at this photograph, in those days, if you go down a mine today, you're fully kitted up with personal protection gear, helmets, gloves. Those days, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And this is how they actually mine a pipe in those days. You come in, you go to the end, and then you mine out, leaving these little pillars behind to support the mine, And once you've got right back to the other side, you come back in there and you blast the pillars off and the mine collapses. And you can see over here, you're developing different levels all the time below you. So kimberlite mining is relatively safe. When I talk about relatively safe, there are very few fatalities compared to gold. But the one fatality or the one danger that they have, you are always mining underneath broken rock. And one of the big problems is to keep as much water out of this broken rock, because as this column settles down and the rocks are grinding against each other, it creates fine dust. And if too much water gets in there, you get what's called a mud rush. And that has happened a couple of times in Kimberley and has killed a couple of people, where this thing just basically liquefies and goes into the mine. Okay, so you'll see that while we tell the kids we're very deep, we're only about 3 meters down, and we walk up back into original level.
And what was this?
Oh, I'm not quite sure actually. I just brought any old thing out.
And this is the structures they make.
Yeah. One of the dangers of open cast mining and kimberlite, unlike gold, gold is something that crystallizes out of fluids and tends to be kind of pretty much spread out around the thing, whereas a diamond is a solid.
Okay.
So here you have a case where, if you look here, you can see some claims have gone deep, and that's because the guy's doing well. Another guy next door to him hasn't been finding much,
Yes.
and he's battling. So now you've got claims all at different depths. And that's when companies started being formed, because one claim would collapse into, say, my claim. Then I'd negotiate with my neighbor and I'd say, well, look, let's get together, we mine together. And that's when Bernardo started buying up all the claims.
Okay.
I mean, here's a good example of different levels of claims. Today, of course, you don't have claims. A company would own the whole thing.
Yes.
But from a geological point of view, these volcanoes come up, like all volcanoes, explode 3 or 4 or 5 times, and each pulse can bring up a different set of diamonds, or no diamonds. So one of our jobs as geologists, we had to map this pipe
Yes.
and test it and tell the mining guys, look here, this is good, this is a bit moderate, you've got to be careful, and then they'll decide how they're going to mine it, mixing it. So what's quite interesting, 1897, I'll show you over there, they invented what's called the grease table. Before that, diamonds were just recovered by sorting by hand. Then they basically ran them over grease. I'll talk a bit more about it. But this building is the original recovery home, 1/3 of it. So this thing was 2/3 bigger. Went right to the outside of where all the grease tables were, banked. And these, there were 3 young designers for this display. One was American, one was Australian, one was a Brit. And once they understood the story of diamonds and coming up in a pipe that looked like an ice cream cone, that's when we did this geological display. This is the beginning of the Earth. This tells you all about how the Earth is formed and where the kimberlites fit in and their age. And for instance, this is one of the paintings that I was talking about. You've seen that one. This is kind of what a gross exaggeration of what we think South Africa looks like below Kimberley. So you've got young rock at the top, but old rock down here, and then you enter the Mantle, and this is about 200 kilometers. And one of the ideas here that is probably accepted now is this orange and blue rock. This is the rock in which diamond grows. And that there is no uniform layer of diamonds. Diamonds are in pockets, just depending on whether there was enough carbon at that time in the earth at 3 billion years. And it's pure luck whether your volcano, and this would be the big hole, hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pockets of diamonds up to the surface. Whereas this guy has only a couple of diamonds and misses all the others. And this would be a pipe with diamonds, and this is a mine. So it's actually, you really have to have a lot of luck to actually discover a diamond-bearing pipe. And here you can see the sort of, this was the other one, we did this for the kids 90 million years ago. This area was lots of dinosaurs living, and these are the type of dinosaurs. We were these people, these are the little mammals. And then there's the discoverer, and that's the cook, who actually picked up the first stone, early mining. And what I didn't mention is that this mine, of the 4 and 5 mines discovered, was the richest and had the best quality stones. So already by 1914, when this mine shut down, never to reopen, and it shut down because of the start of the First World War.
Okay.
The shaft was down at over 1,000 meters, 1,100 meters.
Sure, that's deep, eh?
By far the deepest mine in the world. And that's where the deep mining history of South Africa actually starts. Now the gold mines are mining down at 4,000 meters.
Sure.
Again, we did this type of thing for the kids, just to show you that the deep earth is actually really beautiful. Look at this rock. This is what we call thin sections. We made this at UCT. Unfortunately, these guys haven't replaced the lights. And you cut this is how we study rocks. We take a slice, we back it onto a glass slide, and we grind it right down so it's 1/4 of a millimeter thick. And you've got a special microscope that shines through it. And we look into it and work out what all the different minerals are. And these are the rocks in which diamond grows. So this is and there are 2 main rocks, funny names, they're French names, peridotite and eclogite. And you can see why the early guys thought that they were on an old river when they got here. Look at the shape of these things. They look like river boulders. But that's when the geologist said, yes, you are on a river, but it's 200 kilometers deep and hot. So it's melting and breaking up the mantle as it's coming up to the surface.
How do we get from the rocks into the river?
Inside the volcano, shooting up.
Exploded.
Yeah, it's pushing up. Remember, a volcano is just liquid rock.
Yes.
And liquid rock is less dense than solid rock, therefore it rises to the surface. And what's special about these volcanoes is we talk about degrees of melting. To form a volcano, you've got to melt the deep earth. And there are different degrees of melting. It's like, just imagine I take a block of butter and I put a butter on a hot stove and I turn up the temperature. What happens is some of the butter stays solid, but there's a liquid butter going down.
Flowing.
Yeah. And when it's all melted, that's 100% melting. But you could take that butter off when only 10% is melted. So most volcanoes are 10% partial melt. That volcano there, the Kimberley, is only 1% partial melt. Now what happens, the way melts work, is that all what they call the volatile components, gases, water, they go into the first melt. So the Kimberley melt is full of gas. And what happens when you depressurize gas? More gas comes out. So as this thing's rising, it's actually producing more gas. And eventually the gas is driving it until it's like pull the plug out of a champagne bottle, the thing explodes. That's exactly what happens. These are models, glass models. So the first one was picked up near the Orange River, south of Hope Town. And that caused a bit of interest. And then a year later, in the same area, a guy picked up an 80-carat stone. That's what brought the whole world to Kimberley. And that's called the Star of South Africa. And here's another example, 83 carats cut down to 47. So you're losing a lot. If you ever watched the Oscars during when that movie, The Star is Born,
Yes.
did you watch that?
Yeah.
And what's her name? Lady Gaga?
Yes.
She was wearing this beautiful yellow diamond. That's it.
Oh,
The Tiffany. And this came out of the big hole.
okay.
So here's an example of if you really want your diamond to be colored and to be high value, it's got to have an intense deep yellow color or deep blue. So here's a good example of a 287 carat cut down to 128. Again, nearly half. And Tiffany traditionally lends the main actress this diamond to wear at the Oscars. And of course now the famous,
Jubilee.
what's it?
The Queen.
German, what's this thing? What I've just said. Oh, sorry, this is Jagersfontein, just to the south of us. And the Cullinan diamond, of course, is the biggest diamond in the world. It's about this size, just over 3,000 carats, 3,100 carats, from which many of the crown jewels were cut. And the two biggest cut diamonds of the world, this is the biggest one, in the Queen's crown and the scepter that they carry. Premier mine, now called Cullinan, and this was a very complicated shaped diamond that they discovered in 1988 in Premier, and they called it the Centenary. And this is a big guy also. So I was talking about grease tables. In the early days, they just sorted it by hand. Then, and I know the date because I came across it when I was doing some research. 1897, they started testing the first grease tables. So these are grease tables. And how this works is, one of the properties of the diamond is such strong bonds that it repels water. You can't wet a diamond. If you put a diamond in water, you pull it out, nothing, there's no water sticks to it. So then the guy said, okay, let's crush a rock, bring it up, chuck it through water on a grease table. And because the diamond isn't wet, it falls through and gets stuck in the grease, and the rest gets wet and slides over.
Ah, okay.
And then after a couple of hours, they scrape off the grease, melt the grease, put it back on, recover the diamonds.
Sure.
So they had 3 levels of grease tables in what they call, that's a pulsator jig that just goes like this in water, up and down, and because diamond's heavy, it settles to the bottom. Then gets taken out the bottom, brought up by this Archimedes screw, and into a grease table. So the final thing I was telling you about, when they pre-electricity, and they had to lay the kimberlite out in these flat areas called floors, they had hundreds of security guys working, watching you. If you put something in your mouth, you went into a prison. And look what came out of this guy's tummy. There are 8 diamonds there, of which at least 4 plus 100 carats.
Sure.
So
Amazing what you can put in your tummy, yeah?
So this is the famous check. George. So here are the 2 guys that basically were the big honchos. Rhodes always had the bigger dream. Bonato actually had mental health problems. He was bipolar effectively. So he didn't care too much about controlling the diamond business. And he sold this place out to Rhodes. And here's the check. In those days, 5,338,650 pounds. In 1888, that's a lot of bucks. And that's the real check there. It was taken out of the De Beers boardroom when De Beers...
Which year was that?
1888.
Okay, so 650 was a lot of money there.
5 million.
Sure.
Yeah.
A lot of bucks. Okay, guys, that's it.
Thanks very much.
We can just walk around town very quickly. This is the most amazing display. I mean, people, you don't realize that most people actually walk to Kimberley from wherever, from Cape Town.
Yeah, sure.
Bernardo walked. This guy is from near Plettenberg Bay, and he builds this tricycle. No springs. I mean, the roads in those days were Volkswagen trucks.
Yes.
And he cycles and sails it from Plettenberg Bay to Kimberley and gets here, and that's the real one. It's still original. Even had a brake. So
Imagine how heavy that thing must have been to
this
cycle.
guy would have, I think this guy would have won the bloody Tour de France. He must have had legs like pistons.
And this light's what this for?
During this Boer War, yeah. They used to put the searchlights on top of the dumps
Okay.
to shine, to see where the Boers were.
And this is the shops.
So it's interesting, this is, many of these buildings are original, some are reproductions, but this is the original, in its original place. This was the police station, satellite police station,
Wow.
until the place closed down. Then it was owned by private people, turned it into a house.
So this is like what we saw in the video, the movie. All
No.
this is when they built the town.
Yes. And we'll come there, but we'll come this way. But all of this here and this building on the right is all a bed and breakfast today where you can stay. And that, like good old Australians, they don't come here to work, they come here to sell booze. So that was a famous pub, Australian Arms. Today it's the center of a B&B and you can park inside. It's very nice.
So these were the rooms upstairs and the shops below.
Yeah. I knew the architect who designed this, and there are two styles of Victorian building displayed in this building.
This you just do photographs.
Yeah, one of the decisions we had to make in the committee was, do you turn this into a static museum or a working museum like Gold Reef City? And we decided on a static. There are about 3 shops. There's a barber shop, there's a restaurant, and that's about it. And this photo shop.
Yes. And these were the trams they used.
Yeah.
And this was your workshop.
No, that was some of the oldest cars.
Okay.
It's a beautiful car there, 1905. First car in Kimberley, owned by the De Beers general manager, the one right at the back on the left.
Yeah, I saw yours there. Your old Beetle.
They must have had incredible workshops here. This is a fascinating place. Unfortunately, I don't know why its doors closed. This was the De Beers manager's house. Is this enclosed, locked?
Yeah, Mr. Obi, we are closing one of the.
Oh, I see you closing here. This was the De Beers manager's house. Very interesting. But just to show you how rich some people were in those days. This building
Yeah?
was the party ballroom behind the guy's house. Massive place.
Imagine, yeah, they're the ones who found the big diamonds.
He ended up being a director of De Beers.
Hey, welcome to the Occidental Bar here in Kimberley, just here by the big hole. Just showing you around. Very classic bar. Yeah. As you can see, all the different things here. Very lovely bar. All right, thank you.